that wrong? No, as when you think.
The world doesn't go silent all at once. It fades like a photograph left too long in the sun. First, the background noise thins, then the voices drift out of reach. A song that once played across a diner jukebox crackles into static. A heel once tapping in rhythm with the sidewalk stops cold. Something unseen slips between the ordinary moments and wipes them clean. This is Victor, and I'll be your companion in the dark tonight. The fog had thickened sometime around midnight, painting the alleyways and lamplight in blurred, greasy strokes. Across the city, windows burned low and blue, and every shape looked like a question left hanging too long. Maxwell Finch sat behind his desk with his shoes on the edge of the wood, smoke curling from the corner of his mouth, and a rain-darkened manila envelope resting on his lap. He hadn't touched it yet. It had been left on his door. No knock, no bell, just a whisper between the hinges, a quiet click, and the sense that something had shifted. He'd seen this trick before. Anonymous drops, no return address, thick stock paper like the kind federal suits used when they needed plausible deniability. But something about this envelope felt older, more personal. The initials stamped on the flap weren't government issue. They were embossed in faded silver, DRL. Maxwell stared at them for a full minute before reaching for his whiskey. His office, once a pawn shop above a shuttered jazz club, carried the perfume of old files, ink, and neglect. The wallpaper peeled like sunburnt skin. The fan above his head made a sound like dice rolling across linoleum. Outside, the city simmered. Inside, time pooled. He cracked the seal. Inside were 3 photographs, a train schedule from 1967, and a single typed page, no signature. The photos were black and white, each with the same man in them. Slim, suited, cigarette in hand. But in each photo, he looked younger. The kind of reverse chronology that didn't make sense unless you were dealing with doctored records, or someone with a reason to lie about when or if they'd ever been alive at all. The typed page had one line: "Follow the vanishing line." Finch exhaled slowly, flicked his ashtray. There were clients who came in with broken hearts or missing cats. This wasn't that kind of puzzle. He pulled the train schedule close, running his thumb across the dates. There were smudges in the ink. Grease? Blood? Maybe rust. The schedule had been folded recently. Someone had thumbed it open, stared at it long, and passed it on to him like a cursed relic. The vanishing line. It wasn't a route on the schedule, but something about the phrase struck a chord, like a piece of music he hadn't heard since childhood. Finch stood, bones groaning, and walked to the filing cabinet. He knew he'd seen that term before. Not in any police report, but maybe in the clippings he kept from the old Noir rags. The kind they stopped printing in the 50s, when the city traded shadows for neon and memory for motion. He found it halfway down a drawer marked "Dead Leads," a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle from a 1949 edition of the Mercury Times. Headline: "Ghost train haunts eastbound tracks. 5 witnesses claim passenger line never arrived." Beneath it, a blurry photo of a conductor in mid-motion, one arm raised. The article described an eastbound train, supposedly seen entering the station but never arriving. 5 separate accounts. No bodies, no damage, no explanation. Just gone. He set it beside the photos and schedule. The man in the pictures. He looked familiar now. Not from the file, but from somewhere else. Not real life, either. Something closer to memory. Finch lit another cigarette. The fog outside pressed closer, yellow lamplight bleeding through it like bruises on skin. He picked up the envelope again and turned it over. Nothing. But when he held it against the lamp, a faint watermark appeared in the paper fibers. 3 letters again. DRL. This time, beneath it, in nearly invisible print, Department of Residual Locomotion. He stared at it. No such agency existed, at least not one you could find on the record. Finch had a talent for off-the-books cases, the ones that slipped between the cracks. But this? This smelled like something pre-official, the kind of bureau formed in forgotten rooms during wartime budgets and buried when the wrong people started asking the right questions. He locked the photos and the schedule in his case, slid on his overcoat, and left his office with the taste of tin in his mouth. The streets outside yawned with silence. The rain had stopped, but the mist clung to the city like a second skin. He made for the train yard. The terminal at Carter and Vale hadn't run commercial passengers in decades. It was a skeleton station. Decommissioned platforms, rusted benches, ticket booths like mausoleums for men who never left their shift. But the rumors never stopped. Lights seen where there shouldn't be. Whistles at midnight. Tracks that hadn't shone in 30 years reflecting like chrome under moonlight. Finch had keys. Not official ones, but they worked all the same. He stepped inside, boots echoing against the cracked tile. The schedule board still hung above the main concourse, frozen in time. Last update, 1971. The train on the far right, platform 9, read, "Line withdrawn. No destination. No departure." He crossed toward it, hand on his coat pocket, fingers brushing the handle of his revolver. Habit, not hope. Halfway across the concourse, he stopped. Someone was standing on the platform. A woman. Tall black coat, wide-brimmed hat. She didn't move when he approached, didn't speak, just stared down the tracks as if something might arrive, something late, something owed. Finch stepped beside her. "Expecting a train?" he asked. She didn't turn. "I was told to meet someone. Said he'd be arriving on the Vanishing Line." Finch exhaled. "Funny, I was told the same." Her eyes flicked toward him, pale gray, unreadable. "You ever ride it?" "No," Finch said, "but I've heard stories." She nodded, just once, as if confirming something to herself, then reached into her coat and handed him a ticket. Old cardstock, embossed edges, the same initials, DRL. But this one had a name on it. Maxwell Finch. He turned it over. The back read, "Only forward. No returns." When he looked up, she was gone. He spun, heart pounding. Empty station, no doors opening, no footsteps echoing, just the thick silence of old ghosts and steel dreams. He clutched the ticket and sat on the bench. Somewhere deep in the fog, a train whistle cried. He didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke to the sound of footsteps. Not just one, a chorus of them. Shadows moved at the far end of the platform. A train pulled in. Silent, sleek, not of this era. The windows were dark. No conductor, no lights, just the door sliding open. Finch stood. He didn't board. Not yet. Instead, he held the ticket up and whispered, "Where does it go?" A voice behind him replied, "Where it always goes. To the places we're told not to look." He turned. The man from the photographs stood there, unchanged. "You're late," Finch said. The man smiled, cigarette between his fingers. "I've always been late, that's the point." Finch glanced at the train again. The Vanishing Line. The route that didn't show up on schedules. That took the missing and gave them stories instead of graves. He stepped forward. "Who runs this?" he asked. The man's smile faded. "Nobody runs it. That's why it works." Finch hesitated. Then, slowly, he climbed aboard. The door slid shut. Behind him, the station melted into fog. Ahead, only tracks, glimmering and unreal, stretched into a dark horizon. The train's interior did not match its exterior. Outside, it had been silent and spectral, built from chrome and soot, with windows dark as obsidian. Inside, it was warm, almost too warm, like a memory preserved in amber. The walls bore a wood veneer that shimmered faintly in the dim lighting, and the overhead lamps buzzed with a low-voltage hum, more comforting than electric. No passengers. Yet. Just the rhythmic, mechanical pulse of movement beneath his feet, and the sense that time had begun to flow differently, sideways rather than forward. The platform. A woman. Tall black coat, wide-brimmed hat. She didn't move when he approached, didn't speak, just stared down the tracks as if something might arrive, something late, something owed. Finch stepped beside her. "Expecting a train?" he asked. She didn't turn. "I was told to meet someone. Said he'd be arriving on the Vanishing Line." Finch exhaled. "Funny, I was told the same." Her eyes flicked toward him, pale gray, unreadable. "You ever ride it?" "No," Finch said, "but I've heard stories." She nodded, just once, as if confirming something to herself, then reached into her coat and handed him a ticket. Old cardstock, embossed edges, the same initials, DRL. But this one had a name on it, Maxwell Finch. He turned it over. The back read, "Only forward. No returns." When he looked up, she was gone. He spun, heart pounding. Empty station. No doors opening. No footsteps echoing. Just the thick silence of old ghosts and steel dreams. He clutched the ticket and sat on the bench. Somewhere deep in the fog, a train whistle cried. He didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke to the sound of footsteps. Not just one. A chorus of them. Shadows moved at the far end of the platform. A train pulled in, silent, sleek, not of this era. The windows were dark. No conductor, no lights, just the door sliding open. Finch stood. He didn't board. Not yet. Instead, he held the ticket up and whispered, "Where does it go?" He took a seat halfway down the second car. The smell here was neither dust nor rot, but something subtler. Polished brass, aged paper, maybe the perfume of someone long dead but fondly remembered. He rolled the ticket between his fingers. His name glinted faintly under the gaslight. Maxwell Finch. Only forward. No returns. He'd known a few things in his life to be final. Gunshots, betrayals, the second scotch after midnight. But this felt different. This felt like boarding a story that had been writing itself for decades, only now deciding to include him. As the train slid forward, he watched the window. Nothing out there but fog. No cityscape, no rural blur, not even the frame of tracks. Just a pale, infinite mist curling against the glass. He checked his watch. The hands were frozen at 12. He tapped it. Nothing. The train had either stolen time or decided to ignore it. A soft chime sounded from above, followed by the faint click of heels. Finch turned his head slowly. A woman in a porter's uniform, navy blue, pressed to perfection, walked down the aisle with a small silver tray. She didn't look at him. She placed the tray on the table beside his seat. On it sat a sealed envelope, identical to the one that had appeared at his office. He reached for it. Inside was a single photograph, faded but unmistakably recent. It showed a man slumped across a diner booth, a newspaper beside him. The headline read, "Private Eye disappears. No leads in Carter Terminal mystery." The date was today. Finch checked again. No mistake. The face was his. He looked up sharply. The porter was gone. He stood. The car behind him was dark. Ahead, the door stood ajar, swaying slightly with the rhythm of the train. He crossed into the next car. Here, the air was cooler. The decor changed. No longer the nostalgic warmth of the previous car. Now everything was steel and rivets, sharp angles and utilitarian benches. No velvet, no brass. This car was meant for passage, not comfort. In the far corner, a man sat reading a book. Finch approached, slowly. The man didn't look up, but his voice was clear. "You're not supposed to be here yet." Finch paused. "Why not?" "Because this is memory, and you're still inside the question." The man turned the page. Finch took another step. "What does that mean?" "It means you boarded too early, or too late. Depends who's measuring." The train rumbled beneath them, but the man's book never shook. Finch leaned slightly, trying to read the title. The cover was blank. "Who are you?" The man finally looked up. He was older, gray temples, dark eyes, but he wore Finch's face, or a version of it, more lined, more tired, but unmistakably him. "You've been here before," the man said. "You just don't remember." Finch sat down, slowly. "That's not possible." The man smiled. "Memory is the first casualty of travel." For a long moment, neither spoke. The train hummed, and outside, the fog pulsed like breath. Finally, Finch leaned forward. "What is the vanishing line?" The older man's smile faded. "It's the route for things that don't want to be found. For people who've stepped too far from the story and can't get back in. I thought I was investigating a disappearance." "You are. Yours." Finch stood. "Number someone left this for me. The photos, the schedule, the ticket. Someone wanted me to find this." "They did," said the man, "but not for the reasons you think." Finch turned toward the door at the front of the car. It was closed, locked. "What's at the end of the line?" "That depends on who you ask," the man replied. "Some say truth, others say forgetfulness, and a few, just a few, say it leads to a place where the unsolved are waiting for their next page." "I don't buy that," Finch said. "There's always a reason, a motive, a suspect." "Then keep going," the man said. "But remember, every car you enter takes something with it." Finch didn't ask what. He didn't want to know. He moved forward. Each car felt older than the last, as if the train were slipping backward through some archive of forgotten decades. One car was filled with rotary phones, all of them off the hook. Another held rows of desks, each with a half-written letter resting atop it, ink still wet. A third was filled with mirrors, none of which reflected him. In the fifth car, he found her again. The woman from the platform. This time she was seated at a bar, sipping something dark from a crystal glass. The bar itself stretched impossibly far, lined with empty stools. A silent bartender polished glasses without ever looking up. "You came," she said, not turning. "I never left," Finch replied. She gestured to the stool beside her. He sat. "You have questions," she said. He nodded. "Everyone on this train does," she continued. "But most don't ask them. You're different." "Who are you?" She took a slow sip. "Someone who forgot how to leave. The line does that. It rewards curiosity and punishes it in equal measure." "Are you real?" She smiled faintly. "Real enough." Finch leaned in. "What's your name?" She looked at him then, directly. "You wouldn't remember it even if I told you." "You said you were meeting someone." "I was." "Me?" "Not yet." The bartender placed a drink in front of him. Finch didn't touch it. "What happens if I stay on this train?" "You become a story. One of the good ones, if you're lucky. Or you fade, like most. And if I get off? She tilted her head. Where would you get off? There are no stops on the Vanishing Line, just points of convergence. Is this death? She laughed once, a dry sound. Death is simpler. This is myth. He picked up the drink. It was warm, not whiskey, something older. He set it down untouched. I want to go back. You can't. There has to be a way. She looked at him, eyes full of static. Only if you find what brought you here in the first place, and take it with you. Finch stood. Then I'll find it. Be careful, she said. Not everything lost wants to be found. He left the bar behind. The next car was dark again, humming with static. The floor felt soft, like carpet soaked in old water. He moved slowly, hands out. In the darkness, something whispered. Maxwell? He turned. Nothing. He kept walking. The whisper came again, closer. Maxwell Finch. It wasn't a threat. It was recognition. He found a door at the far end, slightly ajar. Beyond it, light spilled in. Sunlight, golden and sharp, not like anything inside the train. He stepped through and found himself standing in his own office. Everything was as he'd left it. The file cabinet, the ashtray, the empty whiskey glass. But there was no smoke, no fog, just stillness. On his desk, the envelope sat sealed again. He reached for it. This time it contained only a mirror. He stared into it and saw no reflection. The office looked untouched, as if he'd never left. But something was off. The sunlight didn't shift. The shadows on the floor didn't stretch or bend. It was a snapshot. Perfect, sterile, lifeless. Finch stepped back from the mirror, closing the envelope and setting it aside. His eyes swept across the room. The broken clock above the door, still frozen at 11:17. The file cabinet drawer, slightly ajar, just as he'd left it a week ago. The scent of a case that never closed. He pulled the drawer open and sifted through the old files. Missing persons, surveillance reports, a stack of unpaid invoices. But one folder stuck out. It wasn't one of his. Cream-colored, embossed edges, stamped with a circular seal. Office of the Registrar, Memory Archives. No address, no phone number. He opened it. Inside, a single page, typewritten. Client: Finch, Maxwell J. Assignment: Trace Object. Catalyst. Status: Incomplete notes. Subject crossed threshold. Agent compromised. Time distortion initiated. The edges of the paper began to blur as he read, ink bleeding like tears into the fibers. He blinked, and the entire page vanished in his hands. In its place was a scrap of yellowed newsprint. He read it aloud. Famed sleuth Maxwell Finch declared legally dead. Office discovered untouched. Cause unknown. Only clue, a mirror on the desk turned to the wall. He turned toward the mirror again. It sat where he'd found it, propped against the far wall, face down now. Finch crossed the room, slowly. He picked it up. His reflection had returned, but it wasn't moving. He waved. The reflection stayed still. Then, slowly, it smiled. He dropped the mirror. It shattered silently. No glass, no sound. Just absence, like the shape of a scream never let loose. The door creaked open behind him. He turned. The office was gone. Back to the train. Except it wasn't quite the same train anymore. The floor beneath him was lined in checkerboard tiles, black and white, and flickering like old film stock. Overhead, the ceiling arched like the ribcage of something mechanical, breathing slow and steady. Doors lined each wall, dozens of them, too many for a train car. Each door was different. Oak, iron, velvet draped, some arched, others circular. No labels. He moved forward, reaching for the nearest handle. It was cold to the touch, like it hadn't been opened in years. He turned it. A hallway of static greeted him, walls shifting, floor dissolving beneath his steps. Voices whispered on either side, not in language, but in memory. He heard the click of a typewriter, rain on a tin roof, a woman saying his name like it mattered. The hallway bent sharply, and he emerged into a hospital room. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. In the bed lay a man, old, thin, face drawn tight like leather pulled too far. Finch stepped closer and froze. It was him, older, ravaged, barely holding on. Machines hissed and clicked. The chart at the foot of the bed said, Finch, M. Room 17, coma observation. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Finch turned as a nurse walked in, clipboard in hand. She passed by him without notice. Still no change, she said softly, adjusting a dial. 15 years this time. We thought we lost you again last night, but you held on. She leaned closer. You always do. She walked out. Finch stood there, reeling. This was impossible. If he was in a coma, then the line wasn't a place. It was a suspension, a holding cell between memory and forgetting, between waking and never waking again. He backed away. The beeping slowed. His reflection in the window watched him with patient eyes. Then the window cracked. He bolted through the door and back into the train. This time the car was full. Passengers lined the seats, every one of them familiar. He knew their faces. The bartender from the bar car, the nurse, the man from the observation room, even the girl from the missing poster he'd tacked up 3 years ago and never found. They didn't look at him. They stared straight ahead. The lights above flickered once. A mechanical voice buzzed overhead. Approaching Terminal 9. All passengers remaining aboard past this point forfeit sequence continuity. Finch tried to speak, but his voice caught. He reached for the nearest passenger, a woman with short silver hair and a brooch shaped like an eye. Her skin was cold, too cold, like metal. He pressed his fingers against her wrist. No pulse. They were mannequins, or worse, imprints, the idea of people rather than the people themselves. Finch stumbled forward through the car, heart hammering. Another door, another handle. He pushed it open and found himself in the interrogation room again. Not the real one, but a reflection. The same gray walls, but the glass was fogged. No table, just 2 chairs. And in the second chair sat a boy, young, maybe 12, wearing a raincoat 2 sizes too big, eyes tired. Finch knew him. Charlie, he whispered. The boy didn't look up. Finch knelt beside him. Charlie, it's me. Do you remember me? I remember, the boy said. I tried to find you. I never gave up. I know, Charlie replied. But you weren't supposed to. What does that mean? The boy turned slowly. You were supposed to forget. Finch's throat tightened. Why? Because you can't carry all of us, the boy said. You'll break. A single tear slipped down the boy's cheek. I broke first. That's how we started. I don't understand. The boy placed something in his hand. A key. Use it, he said, before the story uses you. Finch blinked. He was alone again. The interrogation room was gone. He stood in a narrow vestibule holding the key. There were 2 doors ahead now. One marked with a sigil he didn't recognize, like a compass without cardinal points. The other had a mirror inset into it, shattered, the cracks forming a spider web across its surface. He chose the sigil. The door swung open into darkness. He stepped through, and immediately the light changed. He was standing in a library, circular, endless. Stacks of books towered up into the void, some glowing faintly, others humming with energy. A single desk stood in the center. At it sat a man with a quill. He looked up. His face was Finch's, but not older, not younger, just stripped, bare of time, like an idea of Finch rather than the man. "Welcome," the man said. "I've been waiting. Where am I?" "This is the index." "Of what?" "Of yourself. Every version. Every choice you didn't make. Every person you failed to save. Every mystery you abandoned." The man gestured to the shelves. Finch stepped forward and pulled a book from the stack. It was labeled Case, Agatha, Unsolved. The pages were blank. "They're all empty. They're not meant to be read," the man said. "They're meant to be remembered." Finch set the book down. "I want out." "You can't." "Why not?" "Because you are the Vanishing Line now." Finch stepped back. "Number, that's not true." "It is," the man said, rising from the desk. "You came looking for a story. You found all of them." The man's shadow stretched across the floor, growing longer, darker. "You were the last unsolved," he said, "and now you've been written." Finch turned. There was a door behind him now. The key in his pocket burned. He pulled it out. It didn't fit. He ran. Back through the stacks. Books thudding around him. Shelves collapsing into static. A voice echoed behind him. "Terminal 10 approaching. All passengers must disembark." He ran harder. The floor fell away, and he was falling again. Into fog. Into memory. Into the line. He hit the ground like breath leaves a body, quietly, but with the weight of something final. The floor beneath him was soft, giving, a texture like soaked velvet or padded felt. When he opened his eyes, the world was gray. Not colorless, but gray. Every tone, every surface, the walls, the sky above, the horizon that didn't curve, was some variant of the same metallic ash. There was no sun, only ambient light, and even that seemed borrowed. He stood slowly, wiping dust from his coat, though it didn't look like dust. It shimmered faintly as it fell, vanishing before it hit the ground. A road appeared ahead, unmarked and narrow. Telephone poles flanked its sides, wires humming above like nerves exposed to air. They led forward, always forward, and he followed. Footsteps echoed. Not his. He paused and looked behind. No one. Yet every few seconds, the steps resumed, half a beat behind him, soft, sure, patient. He didn't run. Something told him not to. The line didn't respond well to panic. It fed on momentum, not terror. So he walked. The poles began to sprout signs, directional at first, crude arrows pointing left and right, but labeled with nothing at all. Then came the cryptic ones. 33 degrees south of never. Third exit to the first entry. You are arriving at what you left behind. Then he saw it. A phone booth, freestanding, spotless glass, resting beside a sign that said, Interlocutor Station, Line 17. He stepped inside. The door hissed shut. The receiver rang once, twice. Then he picked it up. A voice crackled through. Familiar. Too familiar. Max. His breath caught. Clara? Static. What is this? Where are you? Not where. When? The line buzzed. Her voice was thin, like it traveled through 1,000 tapes. You didn't find the answer, Max. You found the record. What does that mean? You've stepped inside the groove. The world here plays what was, not what is. I saw you. I saw your name on the ledger. The disappearances. They're all inside this. You were never investigating them, she said. You were becoming them. He gripped the phone harder. How do I get out? A pause. You don't. Clara, You forgot the case you were working. You forgot everything but the story. That's the trap. That's the line. The signal began to fail. Wait, Clara, please. One last word slipped through before the phone went dead. Remember. The receiver clicked in his hand. The glass fogged, then shattered. He was no longer in the booth. He was standing in a living room, floral wallpaper, a couch, an old radio buzzing faintly in the corner. Someone was speaking on it, a clipped voice, British maybe, talking about troop movements and coastal fronts. A calendar on the wall said 1943. Finch backed away. He turned and saw her. Clara, sitting in an armchair, knitting. Young, smiling, whole. She looked up at him and tilted her head. "You're early," she said. "I wasn't expecting you until the snow." "This isn't real," Finch whispered. "Does it matter?" she said. "It's happening." He took a step closer. "Why are you here?" "I'm always here," she said. "You come back to this room more than any other, even when you're gone." "You died." "Yes." "I buried you." She nodded. "Twice." Finch's voice cracked. "Then why do you look the same?" "Because you don't." She stood, setting the yarn aside. "You change every time, Max. That's how I know you're not done yet." As hands trembled. "I miss you." "I know," she said. "But that's not a compass." He turned away, eyes stinging. When he looked back, the room was empty. The radio played a waltz. And then, silence. He was in the station again. This time it was midnight. He could feel it. Not on a clock, but in the air. Still, coiled, waiting. The terminal was vast, columns rising into infinity. Tracks crisscrossed the floor like veins. Signs above read, "Departures only. No returns." A figure stood near the far wall, cloaked in shadows. Finch approached slowly. The figure turned. It was the conductor from the train. But now he wore a mask. Not a carnival mask, not a disguise, but a mirror. Its surface was perfectly smooth, reflecting only Finch back at himself. "You're not supposed to be here," the conductor said. "I don't care. No one ever does. That's why they end up here. I want out." "Everyone does. Eventually." Finch narrowed his eyes. "Why me?" "You asked a question that had no business being answered." "Which one?" The conductor tilted his head. "You asked what happens to the people who disappear." Finch waited. "And now you know," the conductor said. "I don't," Finch growled. "I know fragments, pieces. I want the truth." "No," said the conductor, voice dropping. "You want a story, but truth isn't narrative. Truth is fracture." The conductor stepped back, motioning to the platform behind him. A train waited there, silent, lights glowing from windows that showed no passengers. "This is your stop," he said. Finch stared at the open door. "What's on the train?" The conductor said nothing. "What's on the train?" Finch repeated. "This is your only chance." Finch stepped back. "Number not yet." The conductor didn't follow. "Then your line continues." The train pulled away, and Finch was alone. The static returned. He wandered. The corridors of memory turned in on themselves. A diner at dusk, a church with no pews, an alley that always ended at the same brick wall, no matter where he entered. Each place whispered names. Clara, Charlie, Agatha, Thomas. People he couldn't quite place, but always mourned. One night, if it could be called night, he found himself in a theater. Empty seats, a stage with a single spotlight. On it, a typewriter. He walked forward and sat before it. A page was already threaded. He typed one sentence. "Where do missing people go?" The typewriter responded, one key at a time, unbidden. "To the places we forget to remember." he typed again. And what happens when we remember? Response. They become you. He stood up. The theater was gone. He was in his office. The clock read 11:17. Again. The mirror was on the desk, turned up. He looked into it. His reflection spoke. I'm almost done, it said. Finch didn't respond. The reflection continued. You should stop. Why? Because endings aren't always escape routes. Sometimes they're locks. The reflection smiled again. This time it showed teeth. Finch picked up the mirror and smashed it against the desk. Glass flew in every direction. The world flickered. And then, he was on the train. Same car, same seats, same flickering lights, but something had changed. He was sitting. Across from him was another man, dressed like him, same coat, same eyes. The man leaned forward. You ready to hear it? He asked. Hear what? The ending. Finch stared at him. Do I get a choice? The man smiled. Number, but you do get a voice. The door opened. A tunnel beyond, black as sleep. Finch stood and stepped forward. The rain had grown thinner, more hesitant, as if unsure whether to stay or retreat, leaving the streets glistening with a slick sheen that reflected the pink and green halos of distant neon. Reed's trench coat clung damply to his back as he stepped out of the silver halo, the speakeasy's glow fading behind him like the after-image of a bad dream. Inside, the air had smelled of gin and secrets. Outside, it smelled like asphalt and unanswered questions. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, trying not to think about the voice recording looped on the cassette. Evelyn's voice, clipped and calm, speaking words that didn't match the woman he remembered. They're watching the Vanishing Line, she had said. But the map is a trick. The real coordinates are in the static. Static. That same word again. He remembered the old radio tower near the edge of town, the one they'd both used to break into when they were kids, daring each other to climb the rungs and shout into the broken transmitters. It was rusted shut now, condemned and sealed after a lightning strike shattered its uppermost dish in 1987. But something about it tickled at the base of his spine. If Evelyn's trail had gone off the grid, maybe it had gone back to where the signals stopped making sense. He got into the Buick and peeled away from the curb, engine grumbling like an old man woken too early. The city fell behind him in ripples of red and gray, and the edges of memory crept in with every mile. Evelyn's laugh echoing through the rain-slick alleys, her silhouette framed in fog and fluorescence, the way she'd lean in close during a game of cards and whisper guesses about the truth behind the faces around them. Reed pulled up beside the old transmission tower just past midnight. It loomed above the cracked asphalt like a tombstone to forgotten frequencies. The fence had long since rusted through in places, and he stepped through the gap with a grunt, brushing aside the coiling ivy that clung to the wires. The building at the base of the tower, once a control shack, now just a graffiti-tagged ruin, held the scent of mold, dust, and ozone. Inside, a panel blinked red once, then died as he entered. Strange. There shouldn't have been power. A cassette deck sat on a metal table at the center, attached to a tangled mess of audio cables and patchwork switches. Dust danced in the beam of his flashlight as he leaned in. Another tape was already in the player, unlabeled. He pressed play. Static hissed. Then, Evelyn's voice again. If you're hearing this, you've already followed me too far. There's no map, Reed, not a real one. Just lines drawn to confuse, to distract. The Vanishing Line is an echo, not a place. Reed felt something shift in his chest. Not fear, exactly. Not yet. Something more like vertigo, like standing at the edge of a truth too deep to see the bottom of. He ejected the tape, slipped it into his pocket, and turned towards the far wall, where part of the plaster had been peeled away to reveal layers of old blueprints and maps. One, in particular, caught his eye. A hand-drawn grid, overlaid with red string and thumbtacks, centering not on any known landmark, but on a blank zone outside the city limits. No roads, no structures, just coordinates. He recognized them. The same ones scribbled on the back of Evelyn's matchbook. As he reached out to tear the map free, a sound behind him made him freeze, the scrape of something metal against metal. He turned slowly. A figure stood in the doorway, face obscured by shadow, but unmistakable in presence. "Didn't think you'd come here," the man said. His voice was gravel, years smoked and soaked in regret. "But then you always did chase ghosts." Reed stepped back. "Harper." "I told you to let this die," Harper said, stepping into the moonlight. His face had aged badly. Too many fights, not enough wins. The same bad-shaped scar still cut across his right cheek. "I didn't think you believed in ghosts," Reed replied. "I don't," Harper said. "But this one, she's different." They stared at each other for a long time, the only sound the wind rattling through the tower struts above them. Finally, Reed broke the silence. "You know something. Tell me." Harper shook his head slowly. "You don't get it, Reed. This isn't about her anymore. It's about what she found, what she was trying to stop." Reed clenched his jaw. "Then help me, before it disappears again." Harper's eyes darkened. "Some things vanish for a reason. Some lines ain't meant to be crossed." But he stepped aside. "Come on," he said. "You'll want to see this." They drove in silence for half an hour, the city falling away behind them like the last frame of a flickering film reel. Harper led him down an unmarked road, barely more than a trail through weeds and silence. At the end of it sat a concrete bunker, half collapsed, with a faded government insignia painted in flaking yellow near the door. He punched in a code on a rusted keypad. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and mildew. Fluorescent lights flickered above rows of filing cabinets and tape machines, all long abandoned. Harper gestured toward a desk near the back, where a reel-to-reel player sat frozen mid-play, the tape looped and hanging loose. Reed pressed the button. The tape spun, and Evelyn's voice returned. "They buried it here, all of it. The transmissions, the files, the truth about the Vanishing Line, but it's bleeding out again. The signal's leaking. If you're hearing this, you have to choose. Follow the voice or follow the lie." Reed stepped back. "What the hell is this place?" he asked. Harper lit a cigarette, exhaled. "Where we started listening, where the lie began." Reed leaned against the cold concrete desk, Evelyn's voice still echoing through the recesses of the bunker. A chill ran down his spine, one that had nothing to do with the damp air. The room felt too still now, too preserved, like a crime scene suspended in time. "What was she trying to expose?" he asked, without turning around. Harper blew a plume of smoke toward the flickering overhead light. Something they didn't want anyone to trace. Not reporters, not agents, certainly not ex-cops with nothing left to lose. He tapped his ash on the floor and added, "Your girl knew how to dig deep. Too deep." Reed turned towards the wall. Rows of boxes, labeled in cryptic shorthand, filled the shelves. VNLX-12, Echo Plan Phase 2, Track 3D. He opened one and found reel after reel of magnetic tape, each stamped with dates going back nearly 20 years. Buried in the bottom, under a pile of faded transcription logs, was a photograph. A grainy image of a woman, Evelyn, standing next to a control panel, headphones over her ears, her eyes locked onto something out of frame. "What was she doing here?" Reed asked. "Working with them?" Harper looked away. "Not with them. Against them. This place, it was a listening post. Off the books. They used it to monitor shortwave bands, pirate signals, civilian chatter. After the Cold War ended, it should have been shut down. But someone kept the lights on." Reed studied the room again. There were too many files, too many machines still humming with latent electricity. "You said she found something." "Yeah," Harper muttered. "Something that didn't fit. A pattern in the static. Repeating tones embedded in old broadcasts. Numbers stations. Coded intervals. All of them aligning to something. She thought it was a message. Or maybe a map. To the Vanishing Line." Harper gave a tight nod. "But the signal doesn't lead to a place. Not exactly." Reed narrowed his eyes. "Then what?" "A moment," Harper said. "A fracture in time, like a tape that skips back to the beginning just before it ends." The thought sat in Reed's mind like a pit. She believed this? She was willing to die for it. Reed felt his fingers tighten around the photo in his hand. Or disappear. Harper said nothing. Reed pulled the box closer and began unspooling one of the reels. "If there's a pattern, I'll find it." That's what she said. They worked through the night, threading reels through readers, scanning logs, matching timestamps. Reed's eyes blurred as the hours bled together, static merging with memories, tape hiss bleeding into Evelyn's laugh from some half-remembered night. And then, around dawn, something clicked. A file labeled Echo Segment 7B began with the usual bursts of shortwave chatter. Numbers read aloud in a slow, deliberate voice. Then came a hum, faint at first, like wind through glass, and under it, unmistakably, a voice. Evelyn's. "Signal breach detected at 41.303 north, 73.789 west. Adjusting frequency, aligning with the drift." The coordinates burned into Reed's mind. He grabbed a map, plotted the point. "Upstate," he muttered. "Right near the reservoir." Harper looked over his shoulder. "Abandoned hamlet. Nobody's lived there in 50 years. Then that's where I'm going." Harper hesitated. "If she's still out there, I need to know." Reed left the bunker as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the gravel. He drove north, past the sleeping towns and silent fields, into the thick woods where roads forgot their names. The GPS died 20 miles from the nearest intersection. The rest, he navigated by instinct and memory. The reservoir was glass still when he arrived. Mist hovered low over the water. A rusted fence marked the boundary of the old hamlet, Dunbridge, now mostly overgrown and half swallowed by trees. He parked, stepped out, and began walking. Time lost meaning among the ruins. Chimneys stood without houses. Stone walls looped through the forest like relics of a forgotten maze. Somewhere nearby, the signal was pulsing. He could feel it in his teeth. He followed the remnants of a trail until he reached what had once been a radio shack, barely more than a collapsed roof and warped beams. But beneath it, nestled in the earth, was a trapdoor, newer than the rest, with a keypad. He knelt, the number Evelyn had whispered on the tape looped in his mind. 3, 1, 7, 4. He typed it. The door hissed open, stairs spiraled down into darkness. Reed descended, flashlight trembling in his grip. At the bottom, he found a narrow hallway, old concrete walls, conduits exposed, everything damp and humming with unseen power. The hum grew louder as he moved forward. A door marked Transmission Room A swung open with a nudge. Inside, Evelyn, or someone who looked like her. She stood before a bank of equipment, headset on, voice low, speaking into a mic that fed a looping signal into the ether. Adjusting drift, maintaining frequency, still transmitting? Evelyn, he whispered. She turned. Her eyes flickered, a second of recognition, then something else. Static danced in the pupils like reflections of a broken screen. You found me, she said softly. Too late. Reed stepped closer. What are you doing? I'm keeping the door open, she said, so others can see, so they'll understand the line isn't a place. It's a frequency, a state of listening. You disappeared. People think you're dead. I was, she said, but the signal brought me back. Reed shook his head. This isn't you. It's more than me, she whispered. Then the walls groaned. Lights dimmed. The signal spiked. The line's thinning again, she said. I can't hold it. Then let it go, he said. Come with me. Her expression cracked. You don't understand. If I stop, the memory ends. Everyone who vanished, they stay gone. He stepped forward, took her hand. Then we find another way. The signal pulsed once, a shockwave through the room. The equipment sparked. Evelyn screamed. Reed grabbed her, yanking the headset away. The noise stopped. The lights returned. She collapsed into his arms. He held her for a long time, heart pounding, unsure whether she was alive or just returned to something approximating life. Outside, the sun filtered through the trees. A breeze moved through the leaves like a whisper. Later, after the bunker had been sealed again, and Evelyn rested in the back seat, asleep but breathing, Reed stood at the edge of the reservoir and listened. Only silence. But for the first time, he didn't mind. Reed drove back toward the city as the first drops of rain began to fall. Evelyn slept in the passenger seat, her breathing steady but shallow. Every few miles, he glanced at her to be sure she was still there, not a mirage, not a specter conjured by memory or madness. She looked real, though changed. Thinner, paler, like someone who had spent too long listening to something the world wasn't meant to hear. The skyline emerged out of the storm, ghostly and gray. He avoided the main highways, opting for the old routes, the ones forgotten by the GPS and missed by surveillance. Evelyn stirred as they crossed the East River, her eyes opening slowly, lips dry. Where are we? She whispered. Almost home, he said, unsure what that word meant anymore. She nodded and turned to the window. Her fingers twitched as though still trying to tune a dial. You remember what happened? Reed asked. Some, she said. Not everything. It's like a dream unraveling. But I remember you. That small thing hit him harder than he expected. He cleared his throat, focused on the road. You were transmitting from that place, the hamlet. The line. I wasn't just transmitting, she said. I was keeping it from closing. What is it? He asked. Really? Evelyn looked at him, the shadows under her eyes deepening. A rupture, like a fault line, but in time and memory. It loops, but not perfectly. Each time it replays, it degrades, like an old broadcast repeating until it erases itself. And the people who disappear? They don't die. Not right away. They get caught in the signal. Echoed. Reed didn't want to believe it, but he'd seen too much now. Then why bring it here? She didn't answer. He brought her to an old safe house, one of his past lives' many relics, tucked above a laundromat on Delancey. Inside, the walls were bare but solid. A cot, a hot plate, a shortwave receiver still humming with ghost channels. It was enough. As she slept again, Reed turned on the radio, letting the white noise fill the room. His mind raced through everything they'd found: coordinates, frequencies, Evelyn's looped broadcasts. He pulled out the logs from Harper's bunker and began to piece together the pattern. The phrase, "Vanishing Line confirmed, station crosspoint Echo 7, repeated across multiple files. Echo 7. It had come up again and again in the broadcasts. A node in the network, a source. He checked the frequency tied to that node, 111.7 megahertz. A civilian band, local range. Someone had been broadcasting from inside the city. The address tied to the call sign was even stranger, a long-defunct station called WELZ, once a jazz outlet turned pirate operation, then supposedly condemned. He circled the building's location. Lower Manhattan. Pier 33. Reed looked at Evelyn. She was mumbling in her sleep now, fragments of old broadcasts slipping from her mouth. 109 by 90, cross signal drift, Echo 7 aligning. It wasn't over. Whatever had happened at the reservoir had only been a part of it. The center of the signal still pulsed somewhere deeper, closer. And Evelyn was still linked to it. The next day, Reed drove to the pier alone. The rain had stopped, but the fog clung to the water like static. The old Wells building stood at the edge of the dock, its windows boarded, the door chained. He cut through and stepped inside. Dust swirled in the faint light. Old equipment lay in ruin, turntables, microphone arms, disassembled antennae. But one machine still blinked. A low-frequency transmitter rigged to a backup generator. Someone had kept it running. Reed stepped closer and saw a reel already in place, labeled in Evelyn's handwriting. Echo 7, final drift. He pressed play. The tape hissed. Then Evelyn's voice, clear and calm. If you were hearing this, I'm already gone again. But that doesn't mean I'm lost. Not yet. This frequency will hold as long as someone listens, as long as memory has a witness. Reed closed his eyes, listening. I followed the line, she continued, all the way to the end. But there is no end, just a bend back toward the beginning. A place where time folds and signal repeats. The vanishing line isn't just about where people go. It's about why they're forgotten. Static swallowed her voice for a moment. They built something here, years ago, to test broadcast repetition in urban zones. The theory was, if you loop a story often enough, it becomes truth. If you loop a voice, it becomes presence. But they went too far. They didn't account for drift. They didn't account for the human mind. Reed could feel it now. The hum. The pressure behind his ears. The sense of repetition, not just in the tape, but in the air itself. Reed, Evelyn's voice said softly. If you're there, don't let them erase what happened. Don't let them close the loop again. The tape ended. Reed looked around. Beneath the transmitter, a trap door sat half covered by a tattered rug. He pulled it open. More stairs. Always more stairs. At the bottom was a studio, perfectly preserved, glowing with green light. The equipment was newer than the rest, active, live. Someone had been here recently. A man sat at the control panel, thin, sharp-featured, eyes distant. He didn't turn when Reed entered. You followed the signal, the man said. Who are you? Reed asked. A caretaker, the man replied. I maintain the memory, I keep the loop stable. Reed stepped closer. "What is this place?" "A mirror," the man said, "for voices that shouldn't have been heard." Reed's gaze moved across the wall. Photos, dozens of them. Evelyn, Harper, others, people he'd never seen, faces caught mid-sentence as though pulled from radio waves. "They were all part of it?" he asked. "Yes," the caretaker said, "voluntarily or not. Each one heard something they shouldn't. Each one chose whether to listen or forget." "And me? You haven't chosen yet." Reed stepped to the control board. The tape deck was running, but the reel was blank, and still the machine was recording. "Broadcasting what?" "Your memory," the man said. "The moment you entered, you became part of the signal." Reed reached to shut it off. "Careful," the man warned. "You shut it off and you forget. Everything. Evelyn, the line, yourself." Reed froze. The man smiled faintly. "That's how they win, not by killing, by erasing." Reed looked at the board, his reflection warping in the monitor. Then he turned and walked out. He didn't stop the transmission. Not yet. Outside, the fog had lifted. The city moved as it always had, oblivious, alive. When he returned to the safe house, Evelyn was awake. She looked at him, confused but calm. "Where did you go?" she asked. "Nowhere," he said. "Everywhere." She smiled. "I feel clearer, like something's been lifted." He nodded. "The loop's still open, but I know where it starts now, and I'll keep it anchored." Evelyn stood, walked to the window. "Then we have time. For now." In the distance, a low hum rose again, faint but insistent. Not dangerous, not yet. Just a reminder. Some stories don't end. They repeat. The days that followed moved like aftershocks, quiet but never still. Evelyn remained in the safe house, her memories slowly knitting themselves back together, though gaps still lingered. She would sometimes stop mid-sentence, brow furrowed, like she was catching fragments of another version of herself slipping between the folds of time. Reed kept watch, updating his logbook, documenting everything. He knew someone would try to finish what the original operators started. Close the loop for good. And this time, Evelyn might not survive the collapse. They needed help. Not from the police, not from the academic pantheon Harper had left behind, but from someone who understood signals, shadows, and the city's subterranean flows. That meant Carter Vane. Reed met Vane at a derelict diner under the Williamsburg Bridge. The place had long since stopped serving food, but still ran hot coffee for the night crew of the unseen city. Runners, hackers, analog freaks. Vane was at the last booth, wiry and overdressed in a velvet jacket, fingers twitching like a telegraph key. "Didn't think I'd see your ghost again," Vane said as Reed slid into the seat. "You heard the signal?" "I hear everything," Vane said. "But yours was screaming." Reed slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything Harper found, everything we decoded." Vane plugged it into a handheld receiver, fingers dancing across a keypad. He frowned, tapping through files. "Crosspoint Echo 7? Vanishing Line? Oh hell, you dove deep." "It's not just theory," Reed said. "It's real. Evelyn was caught in it. So was Harper. So am I." Vane looked up. "You're looped?" "Maybe not yet, but I'm in the memory field." Vane leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You understand what this means, right? Memory isn't just mental, it's vibrational. If the line degrades too far, if the loop compresses too tightly, it collapses. Not metaphorically, physically. The city's built on signal strata. If one collapses, so do the rest." Reed knew, but hearing it confirmed chilled him all the same. "We need to rebalance the frequency," Reed said. "Not shut it down, not overwrite it. Stabilize it. Vane nodded slowly. You'll need access to the source grid. Reed exhaled. Tell me where. That night, he and Vane returned to Pier 33 with Evelyn in tow. She insisted on coming. I'm not just a voice in this, she said. I'm the tether. Beneath the trap door again, the studio pulsed softly with green light. But the caretaker was gone. The equipment still hummed. Vane scanned the control board with a portable spectrometer, whistling. This is pre-discontinuity era, he said, back when analog cross-points were still used to store echoes. He pointed to a dial marked Resonant Layer Archive. They built this to house whole frequency imprints, he explained. Voices, thoughts, even people, if you had the fidelity. Evelyn stepped forward and touched the dial. It responded, softly illuminating. This is where they kept me, she said. Stored your signal pattern, Vane said. You were the seed. The loop needed you to run clean. So what happens if we remove her? Reed asked. The loop destabilizes. And if we stabilize her outside the archive? Vane hesitated. That's untested. But it might rebalance the broadcast path if you can broadcast her frequency into a neutral field. Where's the nearest field like that? Reed asked. Vane smirked. The old Atlas repeater in the 33rd Street tunnel. Still live, technically. Just forgotten. Reed nodded. Then we move fast. They packed the equipment into crates, reel decks, power inverters, the loop master control, and loaded it into a delivery van Reed had commandeered years ago during another forgotten job. The city didn't notice. It never did. A few cones, a fake ID badge, and you could cart nuclear secrets through Midtown and no one would blink. The Atlas site was a narrow crawl space carved into the bones of the subway system, sealed during the 80s blackouts, then reopened briefly for clandestine citywide communication experiments. Most people thought it was a myth. Reed and Vane knew better. They powered up the station at midnight. Evelyn sat in the middle of the signal chamber, electrodes on her temples, radio coils positioned around her like a halo. She looked calm. If this works, she said, I'll finally stop hearing them. And if it doesn't, Vane asked, then I become a permanent broadcast. The chamber glowed as the equipment came online. Reed stood at the console, heart pounding. Vane monitored the loop buffer. Evelyn's vitals flashed steady on the side screens. Now, Vane said. Reed flipped the master switch. The hum surged into a roar. Evelyn convulsed once, then went perfectly still. Signal is drifting, Vane said. Crosspoint Echo 7 is merging with Atlas waveforms. Reed watched the main feed. The loop signal was unspooling, no longer collapsing but expanding. It was fragmenting Evelyn's broadcast pattern across the entire grid, creating backups. Ghosts, maybe, but no longer closed, no longer suffocating. Phase sync achieved, Vane said. She's out. Evelyn opened her eyes. Reed dropped to his knees in relief. She looked around, dazed. I can't hear them, she said. Just silence. Reed hugged her, tears in his eyes. We got you back. But Vane wasn't smiling. He was staring at the console. What? Reed asked. The archive's still active, he said. Something else is broadcasting now. The reel-to-reel began to spin again. Evelyn's voice played. But it wasn't the one in the room. If you're hearing this, I didn't make it, or maybe I did, and this is just what I left behind. Either way, remember this. The Vanishing Line isn't just one place, it's every place, every loop, every memory uncorrected. We stabilized one node, but the network remains. Then silence. Vane looked at Reed. She was part of a wider grid, hundreds of nodes, maybe more. Evelyn staggered. I remember now. Brief flashes, other places, other signals. Faces not mine, but familiar. They used you to reach them, Vane said. You were the pilot. Can we find them? Reed asked. Not with this, Vane said, gesturing to the ATLAS rig. But if we build a receiver tuned to drift echoes, maybe. Reed looked at Evelyn. We can leave, walk away. No, she said. Not while there's anyone still inside. Reed sighed, a quiet smile forming. Of course. Vane chuckled. You two really don't know when to stop. Not anymore, Reed said. They left the chamber behind, but kept the signal alive. Broadcast outward now, not inward. The loop was no longer a prison, but a beacon. Back at the safe house, Evelyn slept for 12 hours straight. When she woke, her voice was her own again. No static, no echoes. They started drafting the plans, a drift receiver capable of mapping forgotten signal patterns. Vane called in favors, got parts that hadn't existed legally in decades. Reed worked through Harper's notes, aligning theory with reality. Evelyn provided the memory core, her recovered experience, now no longer a trap, but a key. The city outside kept moving, unaware that its very memory had almost collapsed in on itself. Somewhere new signals pulsed, faint, lost, waiting, and now someone was listening. The first new voice came through at 2:13 a.m., a whisper against the hum of the receiver coils, barely legible, but unmistakably real. Sector 12? Lost pattern? Repeat. Cannot hold? Reed jolted awake at the sound, knocking over a mug of cold coffee. Evelyn was already by the terminal, eyes wide, her hand hovering over the gain dial. That wasn't from us, she said. No, Reed agreed. It's from someone else still inside. They recorded the voice, ran it through spectral analysis, and confirmed what they already suspected. The frequency was close, but slightly divergent, like an adjacent loop, bleeding through the membrane. The vanishing line hadn't vanished. It had widened. Within a week, the safe house had been converted into a full-scale decoding lab. Maps covered the walls, each marked with suspected loop anomalies. Photos of people who had gone missing, not traditionally, but subtly, like they had faded out of memories rather than spaces. Vane rigged new receivers in subway tunnels and abandoned rooftops. Evelyn rotated through signal modulation cycles, her own resonance now stable enough to calibrate others. And then, on a humid Tuesday night, Harper's voice came through. Didn't die, not really. Burned the loop out of me but couldn't leave. Tell Reed I'm sorry. Reed didn't speak. He just sat down, his eyes fixed on the static screen. You were right, Evelyn whispered. He found the others. Or they found him. They triangulated the signal origin, somewhere near Edgewater, across the river. An old switching station beneath a ghost rail line. Vane volunteered to scout it alone, but Reed insisted on coming. Evelyn refused to be left behind. They found the station half collapsed, but powered. Flickering lights traced familiar patterns down long dead rails. Inside, the air was thick with ionization, the kind that makes your skin hum before a storm. Reed recognized the smell. So did Evelyn. The loop was alive here. Buried in the walls, they found what they called the archive route, a pulsing core of cables, transistors, and magnetic tape reels looping continuously. It was the center of the broadcast grid, the beating heart of the vanishing line. Looks like someone built a memory trap, Vane said. and someone smarter tried to break it. There were personal effects scattered in the station. Letters, notebooks, audio cassettes labeled with names, lives stored in fragments. One of them was labeled Reed. He played it. "You're going to find this after I've already tried twice to reach you. You won't remember those, that's the point. But if this one sticks, it means the drift is breaking down, and you're outside the worst of it. Which means you can help." It was his voice, a past version. One loop removed. Maybe more. I recorded this during a partial exit. I had Evelyn with me then too, but she slipped. We couldn't hold the sync. If she's with you now, it means this iteration's stable. You're close. Don't stop. The recording ended in a wash of static. Reed stared at the tape deck like it might breathe. "How many times?" he whispered. Evelyn put a hand on his shoulder. "Enough to matter. That's all." They extracted the data cores from the archive route and brought them back to the lab. What they found inside was sprawling. Not just Harper's loop, or Evelyn's, or Reed's. Hundreds of signal loops, whole lives preserved, repeating, some fractured, some whole, some waiting to be completed. They were not the only ones who had disappeared. For weeks, the trio worked to build the network, an array of modified receivers designed not only to listen, but to respond. Evelyn began teaching the others how to reach the stable frequency. They found former journalists, sound engineers, pirate broadcasters, anyone with a memory sharp enough to slice through static. And the voices began answering back. One was a girl from 1971 who remembered a broadcast that no one else had heard. One was a man trapped in a repeating interview, asking questions no one could answer. One was a boy who had never aged, whose signal had drifted since 1994. Each voice, a new knot in the line, each rescue, a re-threading of what had frayed. But not everyone wanted to be pulled free. Some had become the loop, their identities so deeply encoded into the repetition that reality no longer fit. When Evelyn tried to bring one back, a voice called Marla. The loop rejected it. The whole system buckled. Receivers burst. Reed had to disconnect her manually before she was pulled in herself. "There's a limit," Vane said. "We can only save the ones who remember wanting to be saved." Evelyn understood, but it didn't make it easier. One night, the signal quieted. No new voices, just a low harmonic pulse. Reed and Evelyn sat on the rooftop, watching the city breathe. "It's happening less now," she said. "The loops are stabilizing." "Or hiding," Reed said. She turned to look at him. "Do you think we'll ever be done?" Reed took a long breath. "Maybe not, but I think we're doing what we were meant to. The Vanishing Line wasn't just a mistake, it was a message, a map, and we're learning to read it." Below them, a distant antenna pulsed red, then white, another voice coming in. They would keep listening. As long as it took, because sometimes to find the forgotten, you have to walk straight into the signal and refuse to fade. And that concludes our transmission. If you've made it this far, you've heard echoes of what the city tries to bury. Some frequencies vanish, others haunt. But the Vanishing Line, it always returns. Thank you for listening to Midnight Broadcast. The tale is told, the shadows withdraw, for now. I've been Victor, and this has been Midnight Broadcast. Rest easy, if you can.